UFC 323 arrived with a familiar tension, the kind that does not rely on hype but on memory, because merab Dvalishvili and Petr were not strangers meeting for the first time. They were rivals bound by unfinished business, separated by time, evolution, and scars earned. Inside the octagon. When the rematch was announced for December 6, 2025, it immediately carried more weight than a standard main event because this fight was about correction, pride, and truth rather than novelty. Both men entered the arena knowing that this night would not simply add a win or loss to their records. It would redefine how their legacies were remembered. Their first encounter had left the MMA world divided, not because the result was unclear, but because the interpretation of dominance varied depending on perspective. Merab had overwhelmed Jan with relentless pace, suffocating pressure, and endless takedown attempts, while Jan had moments of sharp precision, clean counters, and visible frustration at being denied rhythm. That fight became a symbol of the modern bantamweight dilemma: control versus damage, volume versus efficiency, chaos versus structure. The rematch promised answers that the first fight could only suggest. Merab Dvalishvili entered UFC 323 as the embodiment of pressure, a fighter whose cardio had become almost mythological, whose pace felt less like strategy and more like a force of nature. He was no longer just the guy who wrestles endlessly. He was now a seasoned veteran of championship rounds, a man who had learned how to manage energy while still drowning opponents. His confidence was quiet but unshakable, built on the belief that no one could match him over 25 minutes. Petr, on the other hand, arrived with something sharper in his eyes, something colder, because his career had been defined by brilliance interrupted by moments of collapse. Once considered the most complete bantamweight on the planet, Jan had seen titles slip away through disqualifications, closed decisions, and stylistic traps. This rematch was not about proving skill. Everyone already knew how skilled he was. It was about proving adaptability, humility, and resilience in the face of chaos. The build-up to UFC 323 was respectful but tense, with neither man engaging heavily in trash talk, because the rivalry had matured beyond words. Jan spoke about adjustments, angles, and patience, while Merab spoke about work, pace, and belief. The silence between them felt heavier than insults, because both fighters understood exactly what the other was capable of. This was not personal hatred, it was professional obsession. When the lights dimmed and the arena filled with anticipation, the energy was different from most main events. There was no sense of unpredictability in terms of style. Everyone knew what was coming. The question was not what would happen, but whether it could be stopped. As both men made the walk, the contrast was visible. Merab bouncing lightly, breathing calmly, while Jan walked with controlled intensity, jaw set, eyes locked forward. Round 1 began exactly as expected, but not exactly the same. Merab wasted no time establishing forward pressure, cutting off the cage, forcing Jan to move laterally rather than retreat in straight lines. Jan responded with sharp jabs and low kicks, attempting to disrupt rhythm early rather than waiting for reads. The opening minutes were about positioning more than damage, both men testing reactions and timing. The first takedown attempt came quickly, Merab shooting with speed rather than commitment, using it more as a threat than a goal. Jan defended well initially, showing improved balance and underhook awareness, but the effort required was already visible. Every defense demanded energy, every scramble added weight to the round. Merab was not rushing, he was building. As the round progressed, the pattern became familiar yet subtly different. Merab chained attempts together, pushing Jan toward the fence, forcing clinches even when takedowns failed. Jan landed clean punches in brief moments of separation, but they came at the cost of prolonged physical engagement. The round ended with Merab controlling space and pace, though Jan had clearly landed the cleaner shots. Round 2 marked the first real shift. Jan began timing Merab's entries with sharper counters, stepping off the center line and firing combinations rather than single shots. This adjustment slowed Merab slightly, forcing him to disguise his level changes more carefully. However, the pressure never stopped. Even when shots missed, Merab stayed in Jan's chest, denying rest. The fight began to reveal its true narrative here, because this was no longer simply about takedowns. it was about mental endurance. Jan could not afford lapses, while Merab could afford inefficiency. Every second favored the man who could maintain effort without perfection. By the end of round 2, Jan was breathing heavier, his movements slightly less crisp, while Merab looked unchanged. Round 3 has often been where Petr Yan separates himself from opponents, traditionally known as his strongest round, but against Merab, the dynamic shifted. Yan still found moments of brilliance, slipping punches and landing counters that drew reactions from the crowd. But Merab absorbed them without retreat, answering immediately with clinches, knees, and grinding pressure. This round showed the evolution of Merab Dvalishvili more than any other, because he was no longer reckless in pursuit of takedowns. He picked moments, settled for control rather than dominance, and conserved just enough energy to stay explosive. Jan began to show frustration, not outwardly, but in the slight hesitation before committing to offense. Round 4 entered championship territory, where narratives are broken or confirmed. Jan knew he needed something significant, a momentum shift, a statement moment. He came out aggressively, throwing combinations early, attempting to force Merab backward. For brief moments, it worked. Merab circled, reset, and absorbed. But then the weight returned. Merab pressed again, driving Yan to the fence, chaining attempts, leaning, grinding, making every exchange costly. The crowd began to understand that this fight was not about highlight moments. It was about erosion. Yan was still dangerous, but danger without space becomes manageable. By the 5th round, the fight had become a test of spirit more than skill. Yan continued to fight with pride, landing when he could, refusing to fold. Merab continued to work, shoot, clinch, push, and smother, refusing to slow. There was no finish, no dramatic knockout, no submission threat, only relentless pressure versus stubborn resistance. When the final horn sounded, both men stood exhausted, knowing exactly what they had given. The judge's decision felt inevitable not because of dominance and damage, but because of control of time, space, and tempo. Merab Dvalishvili had once again imposed his will over 25 minutes, confirming that his style was not a fluke but a formula. The announcement of the decision cemented the truth of the night. Merab Dvalishvili had defeated Petr Yan for the 2nd time, removing any doubt left from their first encounter. The reaction was mixed as expected, with some fans praising the mastery of pressure, while others lamented the lack of explosive moments. But the sport is not scored on excitement, it is scored on effectiveness. This rematch mattered because it answered the biggest question surrounding both fighters. For Merab, it confirmed that elite strikers could not outlast his pace even with preparation and adjustment. For Yan, it highlighted the limits of precision when rhythm is constantly disrupted. Neither man was exposed, but one was validated. In the broader context of the bantamweight division, UFC 323 reinforced a harsh reality. The era of purely technical brilliance without physical dominance is fading. Modern champions must be able to endure chaos, wrestle when needed, strike under pressure, and survive exhaustion. Merab represents that evolution more than anyone else. Petr Yan remains one of the most skilled fighters of his generation, but his journey has become a lesson in how narrow the margins are at the highest level. Talent alone is not enough. Adaptability must be complete, not selective. His legacy is not diminished by this loss, but it is defined by battles rather than belts. UFC 323 will not be remembered for a single moment, but for a sustained truth revealed over 25 minutes. Pressure breaks precision when it never stops. Belief can outweigh beauty. And endurance, when paired with purpose, becomes its own form of dominance. This fight did not change the sport overnight, but it clarified it. Merab Dvalishvili proved that modern MMA rewards those who can impose suffering without hesitation. Petr Yan proved that pride and skill can coexist even in defeat. And that is why UFC 323 mattered, not because of a knockout or a submission, but because it showed what happens when two elite philosophies collide, and only one can survive the full distance.